Horror movies have been around since the dawn of film, with short movies like The Execution of Mary Stuart in 1895, or with the first feature-length films like L'Inferno and The Student of Prague. But the truly iconic horror characters really came into the picture in the 1930s, with the classic Universal monsters, and since then, horror has continuously attempted making more iconic creatures and masked murderers, just as famous, much like Leatherface, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, the Alligator, the Blob, Pennywise, really the list goes on and on. In 2004, development began on a new psychological horror film that would focus in on two characters, a couple named Kristen and James, who decided to stay at James' childhood summer home after a late night at a friend's wedding. It doesn't take long before there's a knock at the door, and quickly the couple is thrown into a showdown with three crazy masked people that go on to torment them throughout the night. The Strangers, that would become the name of this movie, and would finally find a release date on May 30th, 2008. It became one of the most successful horror movies of the year, and only Cloverfield and Saw 5 beat them in the box office. Writer and director Brian Bertino would come out to say that he drew inspirations for this movie from thrillers in the 1970s, as well as the 1974 slasher classic, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He went on to explain how the film is also heavily inspired by his own childhood, where he lived in the middle of nowhere, and that one night his parents weren't home, and people were going door to door, knocking and asking if anybody was home. If nobody answered, they'd break into the house. Luckily, his sister answered the door that night, and so their home was okay. The Strangers was an impressive film that both psychologically worked, but it also gave slasher fans a new group to be interested in. The movie's main antagonists were a trio known as Man in the Mask, Dollface, and Pinup Girl. Since the movie's release, it gained a cult following, and really, right after the original film released and quickly gathered success, there were talks of a sequel as early as August of 2008, with a 2009 release date in mind. Only they had trouble with writing, delaying a sequel for almost an entire decade. In May of 2017, The Strangers Part 2 began filming and found itself getting a release date of March 9th, 2018, with a new name, The Strangers Prey at Night. This sequel was immediately greeted with joy from fans of the first film, albeit skeptics did exist, as this long-awaited sequel really decided to drive into the slasher genre much more than the original movie did. This time around, focusing on an entire family, a husband, wife, and their two teenage kids who end up in a rundown trailer park to visit family, only to find out that the dreaded trio from the first film got to them already, and now their lives were in danger. This movie's two big stars, in my opinion, are the siblings Kinsey and Luke, who are played by Bailey Madison and Lewis Pullman. Both really had great performances. Of course, our deadly trio of Man in the Mask, Dollface, and Pinup Girl are also all amazing in this sequel. What I always found amazing about The Strangers and Strangers Prey at Night is that despite being in the same franchise and universe as one another, they are totally different horror subgenres, and I think that is something many franchises have always been too afraid to try and pull off. The first movie was very 1970s horror, and had much more psychological horror in it, while Prey at Night really gave the people a major 1980s slasher vibe, which allowed for Man in the Mask, Dollface, and Pinup Girl all to behave more crazy and erratic than they had in the first movie, where they sort of were more calm and creepy. Almost like after the events of the first film, the trio were no longer capable of being so slow with their kills, like they were searching for that same thrill, that same high once again, and wanted it more and more with each kill, becoming crazier with time. Sadly, Avrion Pictures, which was the production company behind Strangers Prey at Night, shut down in 2020 and completely halted any possibility for sequels to the Strangers franchise at the time. So most fans of the franchise were cool with that. They had an amazing original and a serviceable, if not great, sequel a decade later. You'd think that would be all for The Strangers, only you'd be wrong. I mean, come on guys, remember the video's title? How could this franchise be ruined after having 2 great movies? The answer is, in 2022, it was announced that there would be a trilogy of Strangers movies being made. All 3 of which would be shot all at once, one after another, with production company juggernaut Lionsgate at the helm, and director Renny Harlin in charge of the movies. When this trilogy was announced, the horror fans all around the world went crazy. This was huge news for fans of the Strangers movies, but also big because a trilogy being greenlit preemptively must have meant that they had to have an incredible story to go along with it. To top it off, Renny Harlin directing it, the same man that directed Die Hard 2, Nightmare on Elm Street 4, and Deep Blue Sea, this at first genuinely gave horror fans some hope, and most were intrigued by what the next chapter for the Strangers IP was going to bring to them. So on May 8th, 2024, when The Strangers Chapter 1 released to theaters, a lot of horror fans were excited to see what was next for the favorite mysterious killers. Only to be hit with a movie so similar to the original film from 2008 that it made longtime fans of the franchise a little angry. Strangers Chapter 1 did change things a little bit. This time it followed a couple named Maya and Ryan. They come to a small town on their way to an important job interview for Maya in Portland, Oregon. It's while stopped at a diner in this small town that their car decides not to start back up once they're done eating. So they get the local mechanic to look at the car, and they stay at a cabin that they found on Airbnb. That way they could stay the night in this small town of Venus, Oregon. Many fans found this okay with the movie, more of a backstory behind the couple, the area the events take place in. The writers, directors, they promised more of a story. So early on, things seemed intriguing at the very least. Sadly, by the end of The Strangers Chapter 1, many fans of the franchise were angry because of how similar it was to the original 2008 movie, with basically an extra bit of story in the beginning to make certain characters in this small town shady. Not only was it damn near exactly the same as the 2008 movie, but it was also nowhere near as intense or thrilling. This movie basically gave us a worse rendition of its predecessor. These 2 issues, albeit are major problems for this movie, did not stop it from being successful in the box office, having garnered over $48 million on an $8.5 million budget. Fans of the franchise were upset, and casual viewers were a little confused by the film's ending, leaving the story open, obviously because it was well known that Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 would be releasing in the next few years, as they already shot all 3 films. With the mixed responses on Strangers Chapter 1, really it was up to Chapter 2 to bring things together for this intellectual property. Die Hard fans were hopeful, and casual fans hadn't quite given up on the franchise after Chapter 1. The Strangers Chapter 2 had its wide release on September 26, 2025, alongside other movies Gabby's Dollhouse and One Battle After Another, both of which were much more successful in the box office, with One Battle After Another eventually winning the Academy Award for Best Movie of the Year, along with 5 other Academy Awards, so a tough release date in retrospect. The Strangers Chapter 2 continued the story of Maya from Chapter 1, and focuses on her survival and hiding from the trio of killers. This takes place the morning after the events of Chapter 1, after Maya's boyfriend is murdered and she is taken to the hospital. It doesn't take long for our killers to realize Maya had survived their terror, and they go after her in the hospital. Being inside the hospital sorta gave off Halloween 2 vibes, which kind of made me feel weird about this movie, but that didn't last very long because Maya does make her way out of the hospital. While chasing her down though, the murderous trio does kill hospital workers, and even once outside of the hospital, Pinup Girl kills this woman randomly out on her farm who seemed like she knew more about these strangers, which added to the backstory of these killers in a weird way. Like maybe the entire town knows these 3 exist and yet they all turn blind eye. Maya then runs out onto a road where one of the nurses she had met back at the hospital drives by with her roommate in the car. They offer Maya a ride. Maya accepts, and then not long after, two more men that the nurse claimed were her roommates are on the same road, and they pick them up as well, terrifying the already scared Maya, and so she runs away and ends up being attacked in the woods by a wild boar, which was just not great CGI and almost laughable. Anyways, Maya ends up back at the cabin that she and her boyfriend had stayed at the night before, which is when she runs into a state trooper who's subsequently murdered by Pin-Up Girl, who just happens to just be incredible with a crossbow. Maya, terrified for her life, gets in the state trooper's vehicle and drives until it breaks down. She ends up being outside of the house of the same nurse she was in the car with earlier, Danica, and her roommates. Danica allows Maya to stay there, only for one of the roommates, Gregory, to act suspicious, telling her that she is the only person that had survived the killers before. He then leaves the house, and Pin-Up Girl and Dollface show up and kill all of the other roommates. Oh, and an EMT, who had arrived to help Maya to a better hospital in Portland. The killers chase Maya out of the house and into the ambulance, where she was attacked by Pin-Up Girl. Maya murders her and escapes into the woods, leaving Dollface and the Man in the Mask, now dubbed Scarecrow in these new movies, to mourn the loss of their friend. One thing the sequel did was also show Pin-Up Girl as a child in a very odd scene where she and a boy, presumably the now Scarecrow, killed a little girl named Tamara, which made sense as to why their tagline before attacking people is to knock on the front door and ask if Tamara is there. This has been a line that was used since the original Strangers movie in 2008. Which is cool they added that into the Strangers lore, but it also makes it less eerie now that we know why they did this. There is no mystery behind it. We know who Tamara is, and we know these two have been killing now since their youth. The biggest issue is none of that flashback really adds up. We just knew Pin-Up Girl and Scarecrow were friends from childhood, and really that was it. Upon the movie's release, it was, for a lack of a better term, shit on by everybody. Critics, the general audience, everyone. They were both unhappy with how Strangers Chapter 2 turned out. Everyone hated learning the backstory of the Strangers. They hated the laziness of the storytelling. This movie really just felt like a 90-minute waste of time. Oh, and that damn CGI boar. Just truly, it was insulting. This could have been a great franchise, and it felt ruined. Other issues people had with Chapter 2 was that things felt tired, predictable even. Like not much really happened, and honestly, yeah, these issues are all valid problems that Chapter 2 had. The Strangers Chapter 2 had a budget of $8.5 million and only managed to bring in $22 million. Which in the end didn't make this movie a flop, but afterwards, everyone agreed. This movie ruined the franchise. In most cases, Chapter 2 should have been the final nail in the coffin for the Strangers franchise, but everybody already knew that Chapter 3 was filmed and being released in early 2026, and despite fan backlash, The Strangers Chapter 3 released on February 6th, 2026, alongside, well, it doesn't really matter what it was alongside. Not many people cared about this movie, but yeah, really the only other worth talking about movies released that week was a French rendition of Dracula and a movie titled Solo Mio, which was a movie starring Kevin James. In fact, Strangers Chapter 3 made less money than a French rendition of Dracula and Solo Mio. Kind of pathetic. Strangers Chapter 3 had a budget of $8.5 million and only managed to pull in $9.2 million in the box office, which was a disgusting drop from Chapter 2. The Strangers as a franchise was killed after Chapter 2. The Strangers Chapter 3 was just already made, and they had to finish the story that was already up in the air. Chapter 3 continued Maya's story from the first 2 films. We learned more about the Stranger's backstory, like where Dollface came from and who Scarecrow really was, despite it basically being obvious after Chapter 2. We find out that Scarecrow and Pinup Girl, after murdering Tamara as kids, are caught by the local sheriff, the Scarecrow's father. He tells them to never do this again, and he hid and protected them from legal action. The issue was, this pair was unable to stop killing, and so the sheriff made them promise never to kill a local person again, and that only visitors and out-of-towners could be their victims. It made it easier for him to hide and cover up, and so that is exactly what the two did until their teenage years. They end up following a couple back to a motel from a convenience store, only to find out that the girl in the relationship already murdered her boyfriend. This became their third member, Dollface. Again, this backstory gave fans the same feeling they had after seeing Chapter 2. It ruined what made the original movie in 2008. We were afraid of the unknown, and these new movies ruined that. They left nothing up for the viewer to imagine on their own. Flash forward back to current day, and Maya's sister from Portland, along with her husband and their bodyguard, show up in town to find Maya and bring her back to Portland, only to find that this small town was too afraid to speak up about the incidents. It didn't take long for the sheriff to get on their case, and he actually murders their bodyguard. Meanwhile, Scarecrow and Dollface try to force Maya to kill for them, making her knock on the door of a motel room and watch as Scarecrow murders the couple that was inside. However, when given the chance, Maya attacks Dollface, killing her. Scarecrow, angrily, grabs Maya and forces her back into the truck that he drives. The sheriff, his father, then tells him that Maya's family is in town, and so Scarecrow forces Maya to watch as he kills both her sister and her sister's husband. Maya just sort of sits there and watches, barely reacting, and it's just weird. After Scarecrow murders Maya's family, he grabs Dollface's corpse from the bed of his truck and leaves with her body in his father's sheriff vehicle, leaving Maya in his pickup truck all alone. The franchise comes to a close with Maya returning to Scarecrow's hideout, and she murders both the sheriff and the Scarecrow. In the end, The Strangers Chapter 3 finished the story it wanted to finish. Was it great? No. Was it even any good? Not to me, personally. But it did show future filmmakers what not to do with what was a great intellectual property. Too much trust was put into the writers and directors of these films to have all 3 parts given the go-ahead like they were, almost as if nobody cared. That they reacted like, oh, it's just The Strangers. These idiots would just pay to see it no matter what. These movies insulted horror movie fans' intelligence. It, unlike the original movie and its sequel a decade later, left nothing up to the imagination. We knew the killers. We saw their faces. We knew their names. We knew why they killed and when they started killing, and why they went after who they'd go after. In 2008's The Strangers, all they were was a random trio going door to door with no reason to kill the couple inside other than the sentence given in the end of the movie. Because you were home. In Renny Harlin's trilogy, The Strangers didn't feel strangerly at all. They had more story to them than anyone in the trilogy. Even Maya, our main protagonist, has less backstory than Scarecrow, Dollface, and Pinup Girl. Renny Harlin, if he was struggling to find a job directing before these movies, should never have another chance again in his life. Sometimes it isn't the director who used to be great, and yet their name is attached to greatness, like Die Hard 2, Deep Blue Sea, Nightmare on Elm Street, Dream Master, Cliffhanger. They were all made in the 80s and 90s. Renny Harlin hasn't directed a movie worth watching, in my opinion, since 12 Rounds in 2009, and even that is over 15 years ago. Maybe he was a great director back in the day, or maybe he had better people around him back then than he does now. I don't know, but this horrible attempt at directing a Strangers trilogy has for sure done major damage to not only his career, but I'm sure to everybody involved. As I'm writing this script in March of 2026, having very freshly watched Strangers Chapter 3, I don't think we'll be seeing The Strangers again, at least not for a long time. It took a decade after an amazingly successful film for them to make a sequel. It then took nearly another decade before we got this trilogy, and with how horribly it bombed, I cannot imagine anyone wants to touch this property right now. Horror fans don't trust it, and they don't want to see more of whatever the hell Alan R. Cohen and Alan Friedland wrote. And yes, I'm name dropping the writers because how in the world can you goofballs possibly think that anyone wanted whatever this story was? Now, most people don't really care about my personal opinions, but personally, I think this trilogy was done the same dirt that Halloween Resurrection was dealt. For people unaware, Halloween Resurrection was a horror slasher movie released in 2002, and was the 8th installment in the Michael Myers franchise. This movie, outside of the first 5 to 10 minutes, deals with no legacy characters, and really has a bland, dumb plot that if you removed Michael and made it any other killer, the movie might have been better received by audiences. It dealt with college kids inside the house of a well-known serial killer, and gave us a mix between Steadicam and found footage. Then halfway into the movie, Michael Myers shows up and kills people one by one for real. Had studios not been foolish and taken the Michael Myers IP just to sell more tickets, this movie could have been its own thing. And it was originally. I mean, look it up. It literally was a script having nothing to do with Michael Myers. I feel like this trilogy would have been better if it wasn't The Strangers. If this trilogy was made and we were given new characters that were doing these things, then it would not have turned off so many people. Then again, how many people would have gone and bought tickets to see this movie if it didn't use The Strangers' intellectual property? Say what you will, that's just my thoughts on The Strangers. I don't see this franchise making a comeback anytime soon. In fact, I'd be shocked if we ever got another Strangers movie. That's just how bad these movies were, and how badly they affected the horror genre. Anyways guys, what are your thoughts on the Strangers franchise? Did you enjoy Renny Harlin's trilogy? What are your thoughts on the first 2 movies? Was I too harsh on the Harlin trilogy? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to see everyone's thoughts on the franchise and whether or not they differ from mine. While you're here, you might as well subscribe for more content like this in the future, and hey, I've been pretty cool so far, so leave me a like too while you're at it. Thanks again for watching today's video, and I hope to see you guys back here real soon, even if you are a stranger. Ah? Get it? Yeah, you get it.